He had the ring ready in a leather box lined with crimson velvet, a fire opal the size of a pigeon's egg set in a complicated circle of dark antique gold. My old nurse, who still lived with my mother and me, squinted at the ring askance. "Opals are bad luck," she said. But this opal had been his own mother's ring, and his grandmother's, and her mother's before that, given to an ancestor by Catherine de Medici. Caterina de Medici. I'm sorry. Every bride that came to the castle wore it, time out of mind. And did he give it to his other wives and have it back from them? Asked the old woman rudely. Yet she was a snob. She hid her incredulous joy at my marital coup, her little marquise, behind a facade of fault-finding. But here she touched me. I shrugged and turned my back pettishly on her. I did not want to remember how he had loved other women before me, but the knowledge often teased me in the threadbare self-confidence of the small hours. I was 17 and knew nothing of the world. My marquise had been married before, more than once, and I remained a little bemused that, after those others, he should now have chosen me. Indeed, was he not still in mourning for his last wife? Tisk, tisk, went my old nurse. And even my mother had been reluctant to see her girl whisked off by a man so recently bereaved. A Romanian countess, a lady of high fashion, dead just 3 short months before I met him, a boating accident at his home in Brittany. They never found her body, but I rummaged through the back copies of the society magazines my old nanny kept in a trunk under her bed and tracked down her photograph. The sharp muzzle of a pretty, witty, naughty monkey, such potent and bizarre charm, of a dark, bright, wild yet worldly thing whose natural habitat must have been some luxurious interior decorator's jungle filled with potted palms and tame squawking parakeets. Before that, her face is common property. Everyone painted her but the red engraving I liked best, the evening star walking on the rim of the night. To see her skeletal, enigmatic grace, you would never think she had been a barmaid in a café in Montmartre until Puvis de Chavannes saw her and had her expose her flat breasts and elongated thighs to his brush. And yet it was the absinthe doomed her, or so they said. The first of all his ladies? That sumptuous diva. I had heard her sing Isolde. Precociously musical child that I was, taken to the opera for a birthday treat. My first opera. I had heard her sing Isolde. With what white-hot passion she burned from the stage, so that you could tell she would die young. We sat high up, halfway to heaven in the gods, yet she half blinded me. And my father, still alive, oh so long ago, took hold of my sticky little hand to comfort me in the last act, yet all I heard was the glory of her voice. Married 3 times within my own brief lifetime to 3 different graces, now, as if to demonstrate the eclecticism of his taste, he had invited me to join this gallery of beautiful women. I, the poor widow's child with my mouse-colored hair that still bore the kinks of the plaits from which it had so recently been freed, my bony hips, my nervous pianist's fingers. He was rich as Croesus. The night before our wedding, a simple affair, at the mairie, because his countess was so recently gone, he took my mother and me, curious coincidence, to see Tristan. And, do you know, my heart swelled and ached so during the Liebestod that I thought I must truly love him. Yes, I did. On his arm all eyes were upon me. The whispering crowd in the foyer parted like the Red Sea to let us through. My skin crisped at his touch. How my circumstances had changed since the first time I heard those voluptuous chords that carry such a charge of deathly passion in them. Now we sat in a lodge, in red velvet armchairs, and a braided, bewigged flunkey brought us a silver bucket of iced champagne in the interval. The froth spilled over the rim of my glass and drenched my hands. I thought, my cup runneth over. And I had on a Poiret dress. He had prevailed upon my reluctant mother to let him buy my trousseau. What would I have gone to him in otherwise? Twice-darned underwear, faded gingham, serge skirts, hand-me-downs. So for the opera I wore a sinuous shift of white muslin, tied with a silk string under the breasts, and everyone stared at me, and at his wedding gift. His wedding gift clasped around my throat a choker of rubies, 2 inches wide, like an extraordinarily precious slit throat. After the terror in the early days of the Directory, the aristos who had escaped the guillotine had an ironic fad of tying a red ribbon round their necks at just the point where the blade would have sliced it through, a red ribbon like the memory of a wound. And his grandmother, taken with the notion, had her ribbon made up in rubies, such a gesture of luxurious defiance. That night at the opera comes back to me even now. The white dress, the frail child within it, and the flaming crimson jewels round her throat, bright as arterial blood. I saw him watching me in the gilded mirrors with the assessing eye of a connoisseur inspecting horseflesh, and even of a housewife in the market inspecting cuts on the slab. I'd never seen, or else had never acknowledged, that regard of his before, the sheer carnal avarice of it, and it was strangely magnified by the monocle lodged in his left eye. When I saw him look at me with lust, I dropped my eyes, but in glancing away from him, I caught sight of myself in the mirror, and I saw myself suddenly as he saw me, my pale face, the way the muscles in my neck stuck out like thin wire. I saw how much that cruel necklace became me, and for the first time in my innocent and confined life I sensed in myself a potentiality for corruption that took my breath away. The next day we were married. The train slowed, shuddered to a halt. Lights, clank of metal, a voice declaring the name of an unknown, never-to-be-visited station, silence of the night, the rhythm of his breathing, that I should sleep with now for the rest of my life, and I could not sleep. I stealthily sat up, raised the blind a little, and huddled against the cold window that misted over with the warmth of my breathing, gazing out at the dark platform towards those rectangles of domestic lamplight that promised warmth, company, a supper of sausages hissing in a pan on the stove, for the station master, his children tucked up in a bed asleep in the brick house with the painted shutters, all the paraphernalia of the everyday world from which I, with my stunning marriage, had exiled myself. Into marriage, into exile, I sensed it, I knew it, that henceforth I would always be lonely. Yet that was part of the already familiar weight of the fire opal that glimmered like a gypsy's magic ball, so that I could not take my eyes off it when I played the piano. This ring, the bloody bandage of rubies, the wardrobe of clothes from Poiret and Worth, his scent of Russian leather, all had conspired to seduce me so utterly that I could not say I felt one single twinge of regret for the world of tartines and marman that now receded from me as if drawn away on a string, like a child's toy, as the train began to throb again, as if in delighted anticipation of the distance it would take me. The first grey streamers of the dawn now flew in the sky, and an eldritch half-light seeped into the railway carriage. I heard no change in his breathing, but my heightened, excited senses told me he was awake and gazing at me. A huge man, an enormous man, and his eyes dark and motionless as those eyes the ancient Egyptians painted upon their sarcophagi, fixed upon me. I felt a certain tension in the pit of my stomach, to be so watched in such silence. A match struck. He was igniting a Romeo y Julieta, fat as a baby's arm.